He was a man who had built everything with his own hands. From nothing, he had climbed step by step into a life that most people could only dream of. His days were filled with meetings, decisions, and business strategies, but despite his busy schedule, he had never forgotten the woman who had raised him. His mother had been his anchor, his guide, and his constant support. She was elderly now, and time had slowed her down, but in her eyes there was a sparkle of life and a wisdom that only years could give. Life had been good to him in many ways. His company had grown beyond borders, earning him a reputation not just as a businessman but as a man who cared about people. He lived in a mansion that was more like a palace, with rooms filled with art, books, and memories of a lifetime. Yet despite all the wealth, he never wanted to be distant from family. He believed that love and care could never be replaced by money, and his mother had always agreed. When he met his fiancée, everything seemed perfect. She was beautiful, elegant, and spoke with confidence that could charm anyone. Friends and colleagues admired her, and for a time he too was captivated. She seemed to understand the finer things in life and fit seamlessly into his world. To him, she was the missing piece that completed his happiness, the person who would stand by him not just in public but in private life as well. They laughed together, traveled together, and attended the most luxurious events side by side. On the outside, everything looked flawless, but sometimes appearances can be deceiving. At first, the small signs were easy to dismiss. A comment here or there that seemed off, a smile that didn't reach the eyes, a slight impatience whenever his mother spoke or moved slowly. He had brushed them aside, telling himself that she might just be adjusting to family life or that people have bad days. After all, everyone could make mistakes. He wanted to believe in the best of her, and in doing so, he ignored what should have been warning signs. His mother had noticed, of course. She was quiet about it at first, not wanting to create tension or seem ungrateful for his happiness. But there were moments when she could not hide her unease. Her eyes would follow the fiancé in silence, her expressions betraying worry that words could not fully convey. She had lived through enough to understand the subtleties of human behavior, the way a smile can mask irritation, the way a voice can hide frustration. She knew something was not right. Despite her intuition, she respected his choices. She believed in giving people a chance, and she loved her son enough to want him happy, even if it meant sacrificing her own comfort. She had raised him to be compassionate, to see the good in people, and she hoped that he would not rush to judgment. Yet deep down she carried a quiet concern, a whisper of caution that she could not entirely shake off. The weekend was approaching, and he had planned a small family gathering at his mansion. He wanted to celebrate not just success, but life, love, and togetherness. Friends, colleagues, and family members would come, but the most important guest was his mother. She would sit at the center, surrounded by the people who loved her, enjoying the warmth of a home that was more than just walls and furniture. It was a place of memories, laughter, and care. The fiancé had insisted on helping with the preparations. At first, he appreciated it. She organized flowers, helped with the menu, and even offered to take care of minor details around the house. He thought she was being thoughtful, generous, and supportive. But as the day progressed, subtle tensions began to show. She would offer suggestions in a tone that bordered on criticism, rearranging things without asking, speaking over the mother when instructions were given. It was easy to miss at first, but for someone who knew both women well, the signs were unmistakable. He was busy with calls and messages, moving between rooms, checking on the arrangements, and trying to maintain a calm atmosphere. He trusted that everything was fine, that the fiancé was just trying to help, and that his mother was adjusting as she always did. He had always believed that family could handle minor disagreements without escalating them, that respect and patience would guide them through any small conflict. He was confident, perhaps too confident, that nothing serious could happen. In the quiet moments, he would peek from the hallway or glance into the rooms, noticing the subtle interactions. The fiancé would speak sharply, her gestures impatient, while his mother remained composed, responding politely but firmly. There was tension, a silent battle of wills, but he convinced himself it was nothing. Families sometimes had disagreements, he reasoned, and with his experience in business, he understood that conflicts could exist even in the most harmonious settings. As the afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows, a sense of unease began to grow in him, though he could not pinpoint why. The sound of raised voices reached his ears, faint but distinct. It was unusual for them to argue in such a way, especially in his presence, and yet, when he looked around, he saw nothing overtly alarming. Just a scene of activity, with the fiancé arranging things and his mother quietly responding. He shrugged it off, telling himself that perhaps it was a minor disagreement, a difference in opinion over flowers or table settings. But the instinct inside him, a deep, protective instinct honed over years of business decisions and personal judgment, started to stir. Something felt off. The way his fiancé's tone clipped at his mother, the way her eyes rolled when instructions were given, the subtle impatience that colored her words. It all felt wrong.
And yet he was busy, caught in the routine of a successful man, telling himself that he should not overreact.
He had always believed in observation before action, in understanding the whole picture before making a judgment. He decided to give them space. Perhaps it was nothing. Perhaps it was a misunderstanding, he thought. Yet he could not ignore the slight tightening in his chest, the unease that grew as he moved from one room to another. Every glance, every sound seemed amplified. The laughter and chatter from the kitchen contrasted sharply with the low hum of tension from the living room, where the women were. He realized with a sinking feeling that there was more to this than he had wanted to see. The rest of the day went on with outward normalcy. Guests arrived, the house filled with light chatter, clinking glasses, and laughter. He tried to immerse himself in the social aspect, to smile, to greet, and to make everyone comfortable. Yet his mind kept wandering back to those moments of quiet tension. He remembered the tone of voice, the slight impatience, the sharp retorts. It was a small glimpse, but it was enough to stir concern. That evening, as the sun began to set, he found himself wandering through the halls, checking on preparations and glancing at the rooms where his mother and fiancé were. The scene that met his eyes stopped him cold. They were in the sitting room, standing close together, but the fiancé was speaking in a tone that was unmistakably harsh. His mother stood her ground, but the look on her face was a mixture of patience and hurt. He felt a surge of protectiveness, a fire that had been dormant under years of calm and careful observation. This was no minor disagreement. This was something deeper, something that required his attention immediately. He did not rush in. He paused, watching, trying to understand, to grasp the situation fully. He realized that this was a pivotal moment, a moment that could change the course of his personal life. He thought of all the times he had ignored the subtle signs, the small moments he had dismissed in favor of appearances and convenience. He thought of his mother, who had given him everything, who had raised him with love, respect, and values. He knew that he could not ignore what was happening now. As he took a step closer, ready to intervene if necessary, he felt a mix of emotions, anger, disappointment, and disbelief, but also clarity. He knew that he had to act, but not in haste. He had to observe, understand, and then respond. The perfect life he had built, the careful balance of love, wealth, and family, was now at a crossroads. How he handled this moment would define not just the evening, but the relationships he cherished most, and so, with a steady breath, he positioned himself at the doorway, invisible to them for the moment, witnessing the unfolding scene. The fiancée, in her impatience, had crossed a line he could no longer overlook. His mother, dignified and composed, faced her with quiet strength. The tension was palpable, a storm held in a single room. He knew that the next few minutes would reveal truths that had been hidden beneath charm, appearances, and social smiles. He braced himself for the confrontation that was inevitable, aware that the events of this day would be remembered, discussed, and felt for a long time to come. As the evening shadows lengthened and the soft glow of the mansion's lights filled the halls, he realized that the life he had carefully constructed was not just about wealth or success. It was about loyalty, respect, and the protection of those he loved. And in that moment, he understood that his true challenge was not in the boardroom or in public acclaim, but here in his home, in a room filled with love, expectation, and the delicate threads of human relationships. The evening air was calm outside, but inside the mansion a storm was quietly brewing. The fiancé and his mother were still in the sitting room, engaged in a conversation that had grown tense and sharp. He had positioned himself in the doorway, silent and observing as he tried to understand what had triggered this argument. At first it had seemed minor, just a disagreement about seating arrangements and decorations, but now it had escalated beyond petty matters. The fiancé's voice was steady but cutting, almost rehearsed in its criticism. She questioned small things his mother had done, The way she placed items on the table, the choice of flowers, even the way she greeted the arriving guests. Her words were not just opinions, they carried an edge that cut into the calm atmosphere of the room. Each statement seemed calculated, each critique a deliberate jab. It was a stark contrast to the polite, composed manner she had shown in public. He could see clearly now that this was not just a minor clash of personalities, but a confrontation fueled by impatience and a lack of respect. His mother, for her part, responded with patience, her voice soft but firm. She did not raise her tone, did not resort to harsh words. Instead, she answered with calm explanations and gentle corrections. There was dignity in her composure, an understanding that anger would not help, that reason and grace were far stronger weapons than shouting or returning insults. He felt a mix of pride and concern. His mother had always been a source of strength for him, but now he saw her tested in a way that made him realize the fiancé's true nature. He stepped closer, still cautious. He wanted to intervene, but he also wanted to see how the conversation unfolded. Sometimes the truth reveals itself in moments like these, and he needed to be sure before taking action. As he listened, he noticed the subtle signs, the tightening of her jaw, the way the fiancé's eyes darted to avoid direct contact, the occasional pause where her words seemed rehearsed but strained. It was clear that beneath the surface emotions were running high, and neither was willing to give ground easily. The tension in the room grew, drawing his attention more sharply. The fiancé began to question decisions his mother had made years ago, criticizing habits, routines, and choices that had nothing to do with the present. It was as if she was trying to assert control, to establish dominance in a house that was not hers to command. Each comment felt deliberate, as if she wanted to provoke a reaction. His mother remained composed, but he could see the subtle signs of discomfort. A brief sigh, a pause, a glance that seemed to weigh every word carefully before responding. He could no longer ignore the situation. Stepping fully into the room, he cleared his throat softly, drawing their attention. Both women looked at him, and for a moment the air felt heavier. He could see the fiancé's expression shift slightly, the careful mask slipping just enough to reveal irritation. His mother's eyes, however, held a calm strength that reminded him why he had always admired her so deeply. "Is everything okay?" he asked, keeping his voice even, trying not to reveal the turbulence he felt inside. The fiancé hesitated, then forced a polite smile. "We're just discussing some arrangements," she said, her tone attempting to sound casual. But the sharpness in her words lingered, and he could sense that she was trying to downplay the intensity of the argument. He nodded slowly, but his gaze did not leave her. He had seen enough to understand that this was not a minor disagreement. He looked at his mother, who offered a small, reassuring smile, almost apologetic, as if to say, "I did my best." He felt a surge of protectiveness. This was his family, and he could not let anyone, no matter how close or charming, undermine that. Taking a deep breath, he spoke again, this time with more firmness. "I want honesty here. If something is bothering you, speak openly, but respect must remain. This is my home, and my mother deserves that above all else." The fiancé's smile faltered, replaced by a defensive expression. She began to justify her behavior, explaining that she was only trying to improve things, that she did not mean any disrespect. But the tone of her voice betrayed her, revealing irritation and impatience that words alone could not hide. He realized that this was a pattern he had overlooked. Small incidents he had dismissed as minor quirks, now becoming clear as consistent behavior. His mother, sensing the escalating tension, remained silent for a moment, allowing him to take the lead. Her presence was calm, but her dignity demanded that she be treated with respect. He could see her eyes searching his, silently asking him to handle the situation without letting anger dictate his actions. He nodded slightly, acknowledging her unspoken request. This was not a moment for confrontation fueled by emotion. It was a moment to reveal truth and set boundaries. He turned fully to the fiancé, his voice calm but resolute. "I have noticed how you speak to my mother, and it is not acceptable. I understand we may have differences in opinions or ways of doing things, but respect is non-negotiable. If you cannot uphold that, then we have a serious problem." For a moment, silence filled the room. The fiancé's face betrayed a mixture of surprise and frustration. She attempted to explain further, but her words stumbled, revealing her true feelings. It became evident that her charm and composure The traits that had initially attracted him were now dissolving under the weight of accountability. He could feel a shift inside him, a clarity he had not allowed himself before. The decision he had postponed, the doubts he had brushed aside now came to the forefront. He realized that charm and appearance could not mask fundamental differences in character and values. The person he had believed to be his future partner was revealing herself in her true light, and it was not compatible with the life he cherished. His mother, though still calm, looked at him with an expression that spoke volumes. She trusted him to protect the integrity of the family, to stand firm when it mattered most. Her silence was powerful, a reminder that love and loyalty often speak louder than words. He felt gratitude and resolve, knowing that he must act not out of anger but out of care and principle. The fiancée, sensing the gravity of the situation, tried to regain composure. She explained her perspective, attempted to justify her actions, and even tried to charm her way back into favor, but the sincerity was missing and he could see through it. He realized that he had been too lenient, too willing to overlook early signs of discord in favor of appearances and social ease. Now the reality could no longer be ignored. He spoke again, this time with unwavering certainty. "I cannot accept behavior that disrespects my family. This is not about minor disagreements or misunderstandings. It is about values, respect, and the way we treat the people we love. You must understand that if this continues, there is no future here." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The fiancée's expression shifted from defensiveness to shock. She had not expected such clarity, such firmness. The truth of her behavior, once obscured by charm and superficial politeness, now lay bare. He could see her struggling, realizing that the facade she had maintained was crumbling. His mother, relieved but still composed, finally spoke a few words of reassurance. She thanked him silently, with her eyes acknowledging his courage and wisdom. The fiancé, realizing the situation was beyond recovery, left the room muttering excuses that sounded hollow even to her own ears. The confrontation had ended, but its impact lingered in the air, a reminder that truth and respect could not be ignored. He sat down with his mother, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. The evening had revealed uncomfortable truths, but it had also strengthened their bond. They spoke quietly, sharing memories, reflections, and the understanding that sometimes difficult moments reveal the depth of love and loyalty in ways that comfort and ease cannot. As the night settled, he realized that the challenges of wealth and social status were trivial compared to the importance of character and integrity. He understood that life would continue, that relationships could be tested, and that choices had consequences. But in protecting his mother, he had reaffirmed the values that had guided him since childhood: respect, loyalty, and love above all else. The mansion, once filled with tension, now carried a sense of calm and reflection. Outside, the world continued its pace, unaware of the quiet storm that had passed within those walls. But inside, lessons had been learned, decisions made, and priorities reaffirmed. The fiancé's departure marked the beginning of a new chapter, one defined not by appearances or charm, but by honesty, respect, and the enduring strength of family bonds. He looked around the room, at the familiar surroundings, at the photographs of family moments, at the laughter and warmth that had always defined this home. He knew that no matter the challenges ahead, he and his mother would face them together, guided by the principles that had shaped their lives. And in that knowledge he found a sense of peace, a reassurance that true happiness and fulfillment came not from wealth or status, but from standing up for what mattered most and protecting those who had given everything for him. The next morning arrived quietly, with the early light slipping through the tall windows of the mansion. The house felt calm after the tension of the previous evening, but beneath that calm was a weight that neither he nor his mother could ignore. The argument, though contained, had left a lasting impression on both of them. He had seen sides of his fiancée he had never imagined, and his mind replayed every word, every expression, and every silence from the night before. He had barely slept. He spent the night pacing his study, trying to make sense of what had happened. For months he had believed he was building a future with someone who shared his values. He had trusted his instincts, but now he realized how blind he had been to small signs of disrespect. It wasn't just about an argument with his mother. It was about the kind of person he wanted in his life. He had built his fortune with integrity and respect for people, and yet he had almost let someone into his world who didn't understand those same principles. When his mother came to see him in the morning, She looked composed, though her eyes showed the fatigue of an emotional night. She smiled softly as she always did, carrying a grace that age had not dimmed. "Are you all right?" she asked quietly, her voice filled with the same calm strength that had guided him through so much in life. He nodded, though his expression betrayed his inner turmoil. "I'm fine," he said, but the words didn't sound convincing even to him. He poured her a cup of tea as he always did when they sat together, and for a moment they didn't speak. The silence between them was heavy but comforting, filled with understanding that didn't need words. "I'm sorry about last night," his mother finally said, her tone gentle. "I didn't mean for things to get out of hand. I only wanted peace in this house." He looked at her and shook his head. "You have nothing to be sorry for. You were patient, and you showed more restraint than I could have. I should have seen this earlier. I ignored too much because I wanted to believe in something that wasn't real." His mother sighed softly. "Sometimes when we want something to work, we close our eyes to the signs. But life has a way of showing us what's true, even if it hurts." He appreciated her wisdom as always. She didn't criticize or blame. She spoke with kindness, helping him reflect without feeling judged. Her words carried comfort and truth. He knew she was right. Life often revealed truth through discomfort, and the previous night had been one such moment. Later that day, he decided to talk to his fiancée again. He needed closure, not just for himself, but for the peace of his home. He found her in one of the guest rooms, sitting by the window looking out over the garden. She turned when he entered, her face calm but distant. There was no trace of the charm she once used so effortlessly. Instead, there was a tension in her eyes, as if she knew this conversation would decide everything. He took a seat across from her, giving her space but holding her gaze. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady. She nodded, her posture straight, trying to appear composed. "I know," she said quietly. "About last night. I didn't mean to be disrespectful. I was only trying to help. Maybe I said things the wrong way." He studied her expression carefully. "It wasn't just last night," he replied. "It's been a pattern. You speak to my mother with impatience, you correct her in ways that are not kind, and you act as though you know better than her in her own home. That's not helping, that's disrespect." Her eyes flickered with defensiveness. "I didn't realize it came across that way. I just thought some things needed to change. The house, the staff, the way she manages things, it's all so old-fashioned. I wanted to make it better." He took a slow breath, keeping his tone calm. "My mother built this home. It's not about what's old-fashioned or modern. It's about respect. You can't come into someone's life and try to change everything about them. My mother doesn't need to change to fit into your idea of perfection." The fiancée looked away, her expression tightening. "You're making me sound like a bad person," she said softly. "I've done everything to fit into your world. Maybe I don't come from the same background as you, but I've tried." He felt a twinge of sympathy but knew he had to stay firm. "It's not about background or wealth. It's about attitude. I've never cared where someone comes from. I care about how they treat others, especially the people who mean the most to me." There was a pause. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of unspoken truths. She fidgeted slightly, her confidence slipping. "Are you saying you don't want to continue this?" she finally asked, her voice trembling just enough to show she already knew the answer. He looked down for a moment, then back at her. "I'm saying that if things can't change, if you can't respect my family, then we can't move forward. I won't marry someone who treats the people I love like they're beneath her." Her face hardened, pride flickering in her eyes. "So you're choosing your mother over me?" she asked sharply. He met her gaze evenly. "It's not a choice. It's about right and wrong. You should never make me choose between the two. If you truly cared, you wouldn't even ask that question." She stood abruptly, anger rising in her voice. "You think I'm the problem, but maybe your mother never wanted me here in the first place. Maybe she's been against me from the start." He stayed calm, though her words stung. "She welcomed you. She gave you a chance. You had every opportunity to build a good relationship with her. But instead you looked down on her. That's not something I can ignore." The confrontation felt final now. She realized that his tone carried a decision, one she couldn't argue against. For a moment she looked like she might say something more, but then she turned away. "Maybe we're too different," she said quietly. "Maybe this was never going to work." He nodded slowly. "Maybe, but I still wish you well. I hope you find someone who values the same things you do." There was no shouting, no dramatic ending, Just silence filled with unspoken regret. She left the room quietly, her footsteps fading down the hallway. He stood there for a long moment, staring out the same window she had been looking through. The garden below looked peaceful, untouched by the storm that had passed inside the house. When he returned to his mother, she could see the decision in his eyes before he even spoke. She said nothing at first, simply reached out and placed her hand over his. He felt the warmth of her touch, a reassurance that no matter how difficult things got, he had done the right thing. "She's leaving," he said softly. His mother nodded, her expression both sad and relieved. "Sometimes it's better to let go of someone who doesn't value what you value," she said gently. "You did what was right." He sat quietly beside her, staring into the distance. "I just didn't expect it to end this way. I really thought she cared." His mother gave a small smile. "People show who they are when they're tested. It's painful, but it's also a gift. It saves you from making a bigger mistake later." He nodded, realizing how true her words were. The pain of the moment was real, but it carried a lesson he wouldn't forget. Life had tested him, and though the outcome was not what he had hoped for, it had given him clarity. He understood now that respect, humility, and kindness were worth more than appearances or charm. The next few days passed quietly. The fiancée gathered her things and left without much ceremony. There were whispers among friends and colleagues, people curious about why the engagement had ended so suddenly. But he didn't offer details. He simply said that it wasn't meant to be, keeping the dignity of the situation intact. In the evenings, he and his mother would sit together in the garden, talking about everything and nothing. The atmosphere, once heavy with tension, felt peaceful again. Birds sang in the trees, and the gentle rustling of leaves brought calm to the mansion. Life was beginning to return to its natural rhythm. He found himself reflecting more deeply during those quiet moments. He thought about the choices he had made, the lessons learned, and the kind of person he wanted to be moving forward. He realized that love built on respect lasts, while love built on appearances fades quickly. His mother's wisdom once again had proven right. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, his mother looked at him with a warm smile. "You've grown stronger through this," she said softly. "Sometimes it takes losing something to remember what really matters." He returned her smile. "I think I finally understand that. I was chasing perfection when what I needed was peace." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky turn shades of gold and pink. The world felt quiet, but in that quiet there was healing. The confrontation had been painful, but it had cleared the way for truth, understanding, and growth. For the first time in a long while, he felt light, unburdened by doubt or confusion. The experience had reminded him of who he was, a man shaped not by wealth but by values instilled in him by the woman sitting beside him. And as he looked at his mother, he realized that no matter what happened in the future, he had already won the greatest treasure in life, the love and wisdom of family. The next morning came with a strange silence in the mansion. The billionaire sat alone in the garden, his thoughts running deep. The night before had left him restless. The argument between his fiancée and his elderly mother played over in his mind again and again. He had spent the entire night questioning how everything had gone so wrong. What once felt like a dream was now tangled with confusion and disappointment. When his mother came out to the garden, she looked tired but calm. She sat beside her son, her wrinkled hands folded in her lap. She didn't speak at first. He turned to her slowly, searching her face for pain. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," he said quietly. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. "Don't apologize for or someone else's actions. You've always been a good son. But sometimes people show their true selves when they think no one is watching." Her words struck him deeply. He knew his mother wasn't angry. She was hurt. She had always welcomed everyone with kindness, and for someone to disrespect her under her own roof was something she didn't deserve. He held her hand and promised softly, "I'll make this right." Later that day, he asked his fiancée to meet him in the study. She arrived looking slightly defensive, perhaps sensing what was coming. The air between them felt heavy. He didn't start with anger. He started with honesty. "I saw what happened yesterday," he said. "I didn't expect to witness that kind of behavior from you." She frowned, crossing her arms. "You're making it sound worse than it was." She kept criticizing me. I just spoke up for myself. He leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. There's a difference between speaking up and being disrespectful. My mother didn't deserve to be spoken to that way. She has done nothing but welcome you into her home. For a moment, she looked uncertain, but soon her expression hardened. Your mother doesn't like me. You know it. She looks down on me because I'm not from your world. He sighed, realizing the conversation was going in circles. This isn't about class or background, he said. This is about kindness and respect. If you can't show that to the person who means everything to me, then how can we build a life together? His words were heavy with meaning. He wasn't trying to humiliate her. He was giving her a chance to understand. But instead of softening, she grew defensive again. So what are you saying? That you're taking her side? He looked at her silently for a few seconds. I'm taking the side of what's right, he replied quietly. The silence that followed was long and uncomfortable. She stood there, angry tears in her eyes, while he sat still, his heart breaking a little. He had loved her once for her charm, her confidence, her laughter. But now all he could see was pride and bitterness. That evening he took a walk through the city alone. The bright lights around him didn't bring comfort. He thought about how life had changed so quickly, how someone he thought was his future had turned into a stranger. He remembered how his mother had always told him to marry someone who had a good heart, not just a pretty face or polished manners. He realized now that she had been right all along. When he returned home, his fiancée was packing her things. The quiet of the house made the sound of zippers and drawers echo through the hallway. She turned when he entered, her face a mixture of anger and sorrow. So this is it? She asked sharply. He nodded slowly. I think it's best. We've grown apart and I can't ignore what I saw. I won't allow anyone to hurt my mother. She's the reason I am who I am. For a moment her expression softened. Maybe she hadn't expected him to choose so firmly. You're throwing away everything we built, she said. I thought you loved me. He looked at her with genuine sadness. I did, he said. But love isn't enough when respect is missing. She didn't say anything after that. She finished packing, and when she left, there were no dramatic scenes, no shouting, no tears, just quiet finality. As the car drove away, he stood at the doorway, feeling both empty and relieved. He knew it was the right thing to do, but it still hurt. It always hurts to let go of something you once believed in. The next few days were quiet. His mother noticed the change in his mood. One evening, she found him sitting by the fireplace, lost in thought. She brought him tea and sat beside him. You did what was right, she said gently. Sometimes doing the right thing feels painful, but it brings peace later. He nodded slowly, grateful for her words. I just wish it didn't have to end like this, he said softly. She smiled kindly. Endings are also beginnings, my son. You'll understand that soon. Her calmness gave him strength. He threw himself into work, focusing on projects that mattered to him. But this time he also spent more time with his mother. They would take walks in the garden, share simple meals, and talk about the old days when life was simpler. Slowly, the weight in his heart began to lift. Weeks passed, and word of his broken engagement spread among business circles and society pages. People whispered, speculated, and judged, but he didn't care. He had learned something valuable. That public image meant nothing if your home wasn't filled with peace and sincerity. One afternoon, he visited a small community center that his company had been supporting. He spoke with children, teachers, and volunteers. Watching their genuine smiles reminded him of what really mattered in life: kindness, humility, and connection. He realized that his wealth and success would mean little if he surrounded himself with people who didn't share those values. That night, as he returned home, he found his mother waiting for him with a warm meal. She looked up and smiled as he entered. You look lighter today, she said. He chuckled softly. Maybe I am. They sat together, eating in comfortable silence. For the first time in weeks, he felt peace. As days turned into months, he began to notice how his life had quietly shifted. He no longer chased perfection or appearances. Instead, he found joy in small things: his mother's laughter, the sound of rain against the windows, the satisfaction of honest work. He realized that sometimes losing someone who doesn't value your loved ones isn't a loss at all. It's freedom. One weekend, his mother surprised him by suggesting they host a small gathering for close friends and employees. It was nothing grand, just a dinner to celebrate the people who had supported them through tough times. As the evening unfolded, laughter filled the mansion once again. The atmosphere felt warm and genuine, something he hadn't felt in a long while. As he stood by the balcony, watching everyone talk and smile, his mother joined him. "You've built a beautiful life," she said softly. He looked at her and smiled. "It's because of you." She shook her head gently. "No, it's because you listened when it mattered." Her words stayed with him. That night, as he watched his guests leave and the house grew quiet again, he felt content. The emptiness that had once filled him was gone, replaced by a quiet strength. He knew now that love wasn't just about romance. It was about respect, patience, and understanding. He looked out at the garden where his mother's favorite flowers swayed gently in the breeze. For the first time, he truly understood that protecting her wasn't just a duty, it was an honor. And though the world might never fully understand the choices he made, he knew deep down that he had chosen right. The peace that followed was worth every bit of pain that had come before. Months had passed since the billionaire ended his engagement, and the seasons had quietly changed. The air around his home felt lighter now, filled with calm rather than tension. The pain that once lingered in his chest had softened into quiet reflection. Every morning he would sit with his elderly mother on the terrace, watching the sunrise and sharing breakfast. Their bond had grown even stronger, built on mutual respect and love. He no longer felt the need to fill his days with noise or grand gestures. Peace had become his greatest luxury. His business was doing better than ever, but his focus had shifted. He began spending more time on charity work, especially for families and elders who had no one to care for them. His mother had inspired this change. He often said, "If I can make someone's mother smile, I've done something right." His employees admired him not only for his success but also for his humility and kindness. One afternoon, he was invited to speak at a charity event about family values and respect. Standing on stage before a large audience, he didn't speak like a billionaire. He spoke like a son. "Money can build houses," he said, "but only love and respect can make them homes. I've learned that no success is worth it if you lose kindness along the way." The room fell silent, moved by the sincerity in his voice. When the event ended, many people approached him, not for business deals, but to thank him for reminding them of what truly matters. When he returned home that night, his mother was waiting for him. She had watched the event on television and had tears in her eyes. "Your father would be proud of the man you've become," she said softly. He hugged her gently and whispered, "Everything I am is because of you." That moment reminded him how important it was to cherish the people who love you unconditionally. Time moved forward, and with it came quiet joys. On weekends, he would host small lunches for his staff and their families. He made sure everyone felt appreciated, from his senior managers to the gardeners. His mother often joined these gatherings, laughing and sharing stories. The mansion, once filled with awkward silence, now echoed with laughter and warmth. Sometimes he thought about his former fiancée, not with bitterness, but with gratitude. Her departure had taught him something valuable, that love built on pride or ambition never lasts. Real love is gentle, patient, and selfless. He wished her well in his heart, but knew that chapter of his life had closed for a reason. One day, while visiting a community center his foundation supported, he met a young woman who worked there as a volunteer. She was kind, humble, and had a natural warmth that reminded him of his mother. She spoke to everyone with respect, from children to elders, without pretending or seeking attention. Over the next few months, they often worked on projects together, and their friendship grew naturally. He never rushed anything. He had learned the importance of time and understanding. What drew him to her wasn't appearance or charm, it was her sincerity. She once told him, "Real wealth is when you can sleep peacefully at night knowing you've done no one wrong." Those words stayed with him. They reflected everything he had come to believe. His mother noticed the change in him. One evening, as they sat together in the garden, she smiled knowingly. "You seem happier these days," she said. He chuckled softly. "Maybe I'm just finally seeing life the way you always wanted me to." She placed her hand over his. "Sometimes we need storms to appreciate calm seas." He nodded, knowing she was right. A few months later, his foundation launched a new program for elderly care. It provided shelter, food, and companionship for seniors who had no families. His mother was deeply involved in the project, often visiting the residence herself. The joy it brought her made him feel fulfilled in ways no business deal ever could. During the inauguration ceremony of the new center, he gave a short speech. "This place," he said, "isn't just a building. It's a promise that no elderly person should ever feel unwanted or forgotten. We owe everything we are to those who came before us." His mother, sitting in the front row, wiped away tears of pride. After the event, the young volunteer approached him and his mother with flowers. She thanked them for creating something so meaningful. The billionaire's mother smiled and said, "It's his heart, not his money, that built this." They all laughed softly, and in that moment, something gentle blossomed between them, a connection rooted in respect and kindness. As weeks turned into months, life settled into a peaceful rhythm again. The billionaire still worked hard but never forgot to spend time with his mother. They traveled to small towns, visited old friends, and even spent afternoons baking together in the kitchen, laughing over failed recipes. Happiness, he realized, didn't come from perfection. It came from shared moments and honest smiles. The young volunteer continued to be part of their lives. She became a close family friend, someone his mother grew fond of quickly. One evening, as they all sat together sharing tea, his mother looked at him with a twinkle in her eye and said, "You know, she reminds me of the kind of woman I always hoped you'd meet." He smiled but didn't reply. He had learned that the best things in life can't be forced, they happen naturally. Months later, when the young woman lost her father, the billionaire and his mother stood by her side. They offered comfort not out of duty but out of genuine care. Through grief and healing, their bond deepened. Slowly, friendship turned into affection, and affection into love, but this time, it was built on a foundation of empathy and shared values. Years passed, and the billionaire's life changed again, but in the best way. He eventually married the woman who had once worked quietly in the community center. Their wedding was small, attended only by close family and friends. There were no headlines, no grand displays of wealth, just warmth, laughter, and sincerity. His mother, sitting in the front row, couldn't stop smiling. She had lived to see her son find peace and true happiness. After the ceremony, she whispered to him, "Now I can rest easy. You've found someone who sees you for your heart, not your fortune." He hugged her tightly and said, "You were right all along, Mother." As time went on, the billionaire continued his work, expanding his charity projects across the country. But no matter how busy he became, he always came home for dinner with his mother. He often said, "I've built many things in my life, but nothing matters more than family." One quiet evening, he stood by the same garden where so much of his journey had unfolded. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. His wife was talking with his mother nearby, their laughter mixing with the sound of birds. He looked at them and felt a deep sense of gratitude. He thought about how everything had started, the painful confrontation, the heartbreak, the lessons. What once felt like an ending had actually been the beginning of something better. Life had taught him that sometimes we lose what we think we want so we can make room for what we truly need. As the evening breeze rustled through the flowers, his mother called out to him, "Come inside, it's getting chilly." He smiled, walking toward her. Inside the house, the lights glowed warmly, and the air smelled of fresh tea and baked bread. It was a simple moment, but to him it meant everything. He realized then that the greatest success in life wasn't measured by wealth, power, or recognition. It was measured by the peace you feel when you're surrounded by people who love you for who you are. And in that moment, he knew he had everything he could ever need. That night, as he sat beside his mother and wife, listening to their laughter, he silently thanked life for every twist and turn that brought him here. Sometimes he thought the hardest goodbyes lead to the most beautiful new beginnings, and for him, this was one of them.